Okay, we are on, sorry, we are on video 1E in our training document series. We are going to be talking about the basics of AutoCAD here. We're going to go through the menus, a few of the standard commands that you're going to see on here, as well as what it looks like going through the properties pane, as well as the tool palettes as well. So we're going to be talking about four main things here: the menus, commands, properties, and tool palettes here. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, in AutoCAD, this is your first time looking at it here, you are going to see the ribbon at the top. The ribbon at the top is going to hold all the different commands in AutoCAD that you have access to. Now, as you look through these, they're pretty self-explanatory, but we'll talk about those here in just a moment. Down at the very bottom, you have your tabs here. You got your model space, which is your creative sort of platform where you can draw everything that you need to draw. Your layout tabs, which are going to be your paper space, or where your drawings actually live once you get ready to put them on paper. And then in the middle at the bottom here, you're going to have what's called the command prompt. Command prompt is a way to get access to all of the commands that we're going to talk about up top up there. However, you can also get access to all these commands through typing in the name of the command down here, and it will also just show up as a it'll show up within that command prompt, and you can access every one of those commands through there. And then at the very right-hand side, there are some other settings that you can mess with here as well, which we will get into here shortly. These are just a smaller toolbar at the very bottom right-hand corner. All right, so let's go ahead and start with looking at the let's go through the menus here first. We'll talk about these. So when you're in the 2D annotation 2D annotation view for AutoCAD, you are going to be seeing all these tools up here. Most of these are pretty basic. So you've got your line, which is just what it sounds like. It lets you draw lines in AutoCAD. You've got your polyline, which is very similar to a line. The only difference is as you draw a line, each segment is a separate entity, whereas if you go to draw a polyline, what you're going to see is all of your lines actually end up being one solid entity instead of segmented. So if I click on this, it highlights the entire thing, or if I click on this, it's only highlighting one segment. So that's the difference between what we see as a line and what we see as a polyline there. All right. Then you have other tools like your circle tool up here. The default setting is to go from the center and then type in the radius. So if you click on a place out in space and you type in a radius of 24, just for example, that circle is drawn as a circle with a radius of 24 inches. There are other settings within there too, which you can play around with as well. Like you have your center diameter, which is similar to center radius, except you're typing in the diameter versus the radius. You have your 2-point, which allows you to draw a circle based on 2 points in your CAD file. 3 points is a very similar type of thing. You're just going to be drawing it off of 3 separate points instead of 2. And then you get these magical ones down here: tangent, tangent, radius, and tangent, tangent, tangent. So these ones here, what they do is, let's say I wanted to draw a circle that touched this line, and this line. I can do that by using the tangent, tangent, tangent type of circle command. And it allows me to draw a perfect circle that fits in between all of these lines that I just selected here. So you may not use all of these all the time, but it's helpful to understand how they work and understand where they are in case you do need them for anything. So moving on to the right, you have your arc. So arcs have several different variations of how to draw them. So you have your 3-point, your start, center, and end, your start, center, angle, and so on. Now, you can mess around with these and just play around with how these work. The default arc that you have up there is your 3-point. So like as you click around, it allows you to draw different points there. And so let's see, what else do we got? We've got rectangle up here. Rectangle is actually very helpful as well because what it allows you to do is draw a square or a rectangular shape. And it also allows you to type in exact dimensions of that rectangle. So let's say this wanted to be a 60-inch rectangle by 12 inches tall. You can do that just like that. And if I go and measure this, you can actually measure it and it will be 60 by 12. There's other commands up here too, like polygon, which I don't really use very often, but it is up there in case you do need to use it. That allows you to draw a geometric shape that is multiple-sided, and it allows you to change the number of sides you would like to use as your drawing standard for that. Then you have your ellipse tool, which is similar to the circle, except you need to drop in your minimum and your maximum radiuses for that. So different things that you have within your drawing toolbar up top in the ribbon. You then can go over to the right where you have your modify tools, where you have move, which does exactly what it sounds like. If you highlight an object, hit enter, and then you move it, you can use that. You can also use a rotate up here. Rotate's going to allow you to flip an object around. So if I wanted to make this ellipse rotate a different way, I can rotate it just like that. Then you have things like copy, which is exactly like what it sounds. So if I wanted to make a second rectangle, I can just use the copy command and paste that up like that. You have your mirror command. Your mirror command is going to allow you to make a flipped object of an item. So let's go ahead and do one of those real quick. We're going to mirror this line right here, hit enter, and then it's going to ask you for a mirror line, which is pretty much just like the center line between what you're drawing. So like from there to there. And it's going to ask you by default if you want to erase the source object. If you do that, you will erase the original line. If you do not, then it will keep both. So we're going to keep both there. All right. You have other objects here like stretch, which we'll talk about here in just a sec. You have trim and extend. Trim and extend work pretty nifty. What you can do with those is, let's say you have a line that you actually want to, maybe you want this line to extend to here. What you can do is hit enter, extend it on out. Or if you had, say, I can't really do that one. Well, anyway, then you can also use the trim command too. Let's say you wanted to trim that back to there, you can do that just like that. So trim allows you to clip a line back, extend allows you to increase the line. Then you get into these other commands like fillet and chamfer. Fillet will produce a radius corner between two different lines. Chamfer will create an angled edge between two different lines. So let's say I wanted to fillet this corner to this corner with a radius of 1 inch. What I would do is I'm starting the fillet command. And at the very bottom in my command prompt, you can see that it has several different options. If you go down to radius, it allows you to change the radius of that fillet. So I'm going to go to 1. And I'm just going to highlight these and radius these. So now they have a radius of 1 inch at those corners. Kind of cool. Also, fun fact too, if you are into filleting, you can also undo a fillet simply by going to the fillet command and setting your radius to 0, which will allow you to square up an edge instead of rounding it. So you can kind of undo what you just did if you'd like to. It's a really useful tool. You've got your erase up here as well. So if you needed to erase something, you could either highlight it like that using the erase command and hit enter, or if you highlight the object now and hit the delete key on your keyboard, it will also erase that object from your model space too. All right, so go down below, we have explode. Explode is a command which will allow you to take something that's grouped together and break it into several parts. So let's use this rectangle, for example. As I click on that rectangle, you can see that everything comes up as one solid line. Like if I click on any of the edges, it's going to highlight the entire thing. If I didn't want that to happen, what I could do is use the explode command and click on that rectangle and hit enter. And now anytime I select any of those edges, it's going to only select one face of that rectangle. Got to be really careful with that. It's really useful, but it's also very damaging to certain parts you're drawing to. So you got to be uber careful about when you're using the explode command to actually pick the parts that you want to explode. Because once you explode it, it's kind of hard to get back to where you were. So anyway, below explode, you can see there's an offset command. Offset is going to allow you to take a line, like this line here off that rectangle, and pretty much copy it out like that. You can tell it how far away you want it to be. So I'm going 12 inches out on each side like that. I'm just using the offset command to do this. You can do it on curved objects as well, like this ellipse. I can go 12 inches out like that. And now I have a Sonic the Hedgehog ring. Well, anyway, so you can use offset to take a line and pretty much make a copy of it that's either offset out or offset in from the original line that you've selected. So that's really nifty. There's also scale, which is pretty cool as well. Scale is a command that allows you to say I wanted to increase or decrease the size of this ring. What I can do is if I know a base point that I want to use, which I'll just use the center here. If I wanted to shrink this or grow this, I can. One thing you can do is, let's say you wanted it to be exactly 12 inches tall from top to bottom. What you can do is go down to your command prompt down here and type in R or hit reference here. And then you can click on the top point and the bottom point here. And what it's going to do is ask you what is that distance supposed to be between those 2 points. So if I wanted that to be 12, I can just type in 12 and it's going to shrink that to a total of 12 inches tall from top to bottom. So that's the scale command in a nutshell. And then the only other one here that we're going to talk about here is called the stretch command. So stretch is a really nifty command. It's very difficult to learn at first. You don't want to get too bogged down by it, but you will have to practice it in order for it to kind of stick. When you start the stretch command by default, the first thing it does is tell you to select an object. Now, you don't want to go around clicking on parts. Like if I clicked on this, it's just not going to work. So it's confusing the way they worded it, but don't get too bogged down by that. In order to get around that, what you're going to do is you're going to start by thinking about it like this. If you wanted to extend this line out, let's say you want to make this 5 inches longer. In order to do that, you are going to take your cursor. I'm in the stretch command right now, and I'm going to start by clicking in the blank space to the bottom right side of what I'm trying to stretch. So right there. Go ahead and unclick and move your mouse up to the top left of the area that you're trying to stretch or increase in width. And it might be it might be second nature to want to go all the way across to here and highlight the entire thing because that's the part you're trying to stretch. But you want to think about it like, hey, I'm not trying to stretch all of this. I'm only trying to stretch this little leg of this item. So I only want to go from the bottom right to the top left of this part of it because that's the part I'm stretching. So once you have that, I'm going to click my mouse and hit enter. And then it's going to ask me for a base point to which I can click anywhere, but I'm going to click on this endpoint and then say 5 inches this way. Doesn't really look like it did much, but it did increase the width of this by 5 inches. So that is how to use the stretch command. And I will be happy to show you that again if you do get stuck on it or you need help with making sure you got it right. The last part of these commands up here is the array. The array we'll definitely be getting into more as we do actual drawing. I'll show you how to work these rectangular, path, and polar array. The majority of the time you're going to be using the path array for most of what you do. So we can practice one of those right here so you can see kind of what that does. So what I'm going to do is the path array is exactly what it sounds like. I need a path to start with. So let's use this arc here as my path. And I am going to make a line that comes off of, I'm going to make it stick off of here as much as I can. So something like that. Okay, so now that I have this line here, and I have this as my path, what I'm going to do is type in array path. Also could just go up here and click on this as well. And what I'm going to do is select the object that I'm copying along that path. So that would be this line here. And then it's going to ask me to select the path, which would be this guy here. Okay, so you can see what's happening is it's creating a line across, like down this path. It's making copies of that along that path. Okay, so before we can close out of that, there are some things I want to look at with you, and we'll definitely be getting in more depth with this command as we go on. But the array path command allows you to select the distance in between each line that you're copying. Right now, it just randomly came in at like 17.76. We're just going to make that 5 inches apart. And if you wanted to, something you can see right away that's happening here is I've made a copy of that line all the way down this path, but then I'm left with this little extra remaining piece that doesn't line up with anything. And so in the array path command, there's this little setting at the top called measure. And if you click on it, you can switch it to what's called divide. Divide is going to equally space those lines across your path, and it's going to do it in a way that it makes sure there's no remaining tidbit of information down here or extra like hang off of that. When you do switch it to divide, you're going to see too that this item gets grayed out. The distance in between is grayed out where you're not able to actually modify that anymore. But you can modify the number of items up here, which is going to allow me to change the number of items that I have on this line here. So you can play around with that a little bit, and we will definitely be getting more into that as we get into drawing more of these types of arrays. There's definitely more to it I need to talk to you about. So that's not it, but that's just kind of a brief overview of how to use that command a little bit. All right. So let's see, what else do we have here that we want to look at? So we've done stretch, we've done rotate, we've done erase, path array, copy, arc, circle, rectangle, polyline, line, and mirror. Oh, and offset too. So I guess what we'll do is we'll keep looking at these here. I'm going to kind of give you a brief overview of some of the other items in these menus too. So like up here, you have your annotation submenu. That's going to give you any annotation commands that you have access to here, which is going to be your dimensioning and your text boxes. That all lives in there. You also have tables, which might be useful to you later on. But this would be where you would pull your dimensioning from. To the right of that, you have your layers. So you have layers as in like, these are the different layers that you can set items on in AutoCAD. And we'll talk about that a little more as we get into drawing. All right. And then that's, well, there's a little bit more to it, I guess, than that. But then you have these items here, which are going to be your colors of your lines, as well as your line thicknesses and your line types, as in, like if you wanted a line to be dashed, you can highlight it, come up here, say you want it to be dashed, and then it will change it to a dashed line for you. That's all through this little menu here. All right. Also, there is groups too. So if you have a bunch of items that are kind of all alone, but all, in an area that you want to be grouped, like all these items here are all separate, I can go over to group, highlight this whole stack of items, hit enter, and then as I highlight that, all of those items are within a group. If you wanted to undo that, all you got to do is come up here next to where you have your group, and you can hit ungroup, and it will allow you to ungroup those items and go back to just having individual items up there. To the right of that, there is a tool called Measure. This is very, very nifty. I use it all the time. This will allow you to make a temporary measurement off of something in your drawing. So you can see right now as I'm hovering over different items, it tells me like that is a circle with a radius of 24 inches or diameter, I think of 24. Or if I hover over this, it tells me, hey, this is a 60 by 12 rectangle and so on. It's kind of a nice little area or a nice thing to be able to just have access to if you need to check something or double check your work. All right. We won't really get into the rest of these right now because a lot of that we don't usually mess with anyway. I don't want to confuse you more than anything, so we will keep on moving. Let's take a look at the bottom right corner of the screen here in AutoCAD. So there are these different settings that you have down here. So grid mode or the F7 key. All that does is it makes a sort of like grid for the user to be able to see sort of along the lines of like what they're drawing. If you like having that on, you're more than welcome to keep it on. I am not going to keep it on myself. I usually don't. This here, I would recommend not having this on either. This is snap mode, which is going to snap your cursor to an invisible grid on the model space. Kind of gets a little frustrating if that's turned on, so definitely try to avoid that. Okay, then this one here is pretty important, ortho mode, also known as the F8 key. You will wear your F8 key out pretty quickly while working here in AutoCAD. Ortho mode, all it is it is a way to lock your cursor. So that way, as you're working in AutoCAD, you can only work in 90-degree rotations like this. If you hit F8 or you hit this button again, it's going to allow you to use whatever angle you'd like. It doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees or not. It's going to allow you to access all of those. But if you have F8 turned on, it locks even to 90-degree increments, which is really nice for some things. I'm always turning that off and on as I'm working in AutoCAD. To the right of that, you also have what's called polar tracking. I'm going to turn that on real quick. Polar tracking is pretty useful. So let's say you wanted to draw a line at 45 degrees, but not 90. Well, this allows you to be able to snap your cursor to 45-degree increments as well as the 90-degree increments too. So you can kind of see what's happening as I'm rotating around. My cursor is snapping to those 45-degree increments there. You can also set it to other angles too if you'd like, but that's the default there. So kind of useful if you'd like using that. I'm skipping over the isometric drawing. We don't really mess with that. I will say, and I will have you pause the video here, this little drop down here, this is your snaps, your object snaps. So at this point, I was going to say, if you want to go ahead and pause what you're working on. And this here is going to be really important. You want to make sure that these are all set exactly the same as what I have here. It's going to help you with our training purposes to make sure that as you're drawing things kind of snap the same as the way I'm doing it on my screen as you're doing it on yours. So go ahead and pause the video, make sure that these are all set to exactly how you'd like to see them here. So we want to see endpoint on, midpoint on, center point on, node can be on, quadrant on, extension on, perpendicular on, and apparent intersection on. Everything else we can turn off. And then just make sure that object snap is turned on. It's also your F3 key for the quick key. And your object snap tracking is also turned on, which is F11. All right, so once you've got those set, go ahead and we can move on to what's going on over here. All right, so moving on to the right, there is a area here. It says 1 by 1 right now. what this is your scales that you're going to be using in your model space. So this really isn't that important right now. When we get to plotting a drawing, this is where this is going to become really important, because you do need to make sure that you're using the right scale for the right view type that you're using. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the plotting process of a drawing, but I wanted to show you this does exist down here, and you will have to be changing these pretty regularly. So, but we'll talk about how to do that and how to make sure that we're doing the right thing with that. So right now, I just want to show you it's there. Don't worry too much about it, but it is there. As we progress into training, this will be a while from now, but as we progress into training, this settings gear that's down here, if you click on that, you're going to see that there is 3D modeling and 3D basics, which are two different other ribbons that show up at the top of your screen. If I go to 3D modeling, what you're going to see is it's going to pull a bunch of commands that relate to 3D modeling versus more along the lines of what we were used to seeing with 2D. So it does make a difference here. I usually use this one by default, but because we're in training and we're starting out, we're going to stay on the drafting and annotation tool set, which is going to be the more catered towards 2D drafting. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to talk with you guys about down here. Now, in the next video, we're going to be adding the tool palettes to your guys's AutoCAD. So as you get into that, you will actually be able to see these tool palettes the way that I'm seeing them here. To open those, what you need to do is type in tool palettes. Okay, whoops, hold on a minute. I'm just going to click on that. Okay, so the tool palettes are a set of blocks that we have in AutoCAD that allow you to draft a little bit more efficiently. A lot of things are pre-drawn. A lot of things are kind of in here to help you move a little bit quicker, but you don't have to draw every little thing by hand. That involves, as much as we have right now, we have a library of cabinets, library of doors, hardware that we use a lot, panels, tie walls, miscellaneous items, and just our plot tools in the annotation tab, and our hatching too, which we'll talk about that when we go to hatch drawings later on. But anyways, there are your tool palettes. Yours won't look exactly the same at this current moment, but as you get to the next video, we're going to be updating that and fixing that. So you'll see those more of like, kind of like what it looks like here on your screen at some point in the next video. The other thing that I want to show you too in AutoCAD is the properties pane. Properties pane is a sidebar, just like the tool palettes. And what it does is it allows you to see the properties of whatever you have selected at that time. So if I select this line here, it's going to tell me that I'm looking at a line. And it's going to tell me that that line, the color of that line is set to whatever layer it's set to. And it's set to layer 0, so the color is white. If I change it to 2D dim, that means that the color is going to change to red because that's the default layer color. You can change the line type in here as well. If you wanted to make it a dashed line, you could do that here. You can change things like the line weight here as well, the thickness of that line. All these other geometric settings are just kind of like where that line lives in space. So the X, Y, and Z coordinates of where that line is. But anyway, properties pane is pretty useful because you can use it to change different things within your drawing through that menu. So also really, really helpful. That's probably about all I want to get into here with this until we get into actually drawing. So I'm going to leave it off here with that. In the next video, you're going to see how to set up your AutoCAD. So it's going to talk about fonts, hatches, different settings that you need to have set, and also setting up those tool palettes too. So that's what you're going to expect to see next if you move on to the next video. And then after that, we'll probably actually get into some actual drawing. So yay.